3, 2, 1. Welcome back, guys. It's been a really long time since I've made a video on this channel. I'm really excited because I've got a whole new setup and it includes a much better quality camera, so hopefully your eyes won't hurt when you're watching my videos anymore. And I'm really excited about this first video that we're going to do together. Coralie Fargeat's The Substance has like completely taken it over. Everybody knows it, everybody's seen it, everybody's obsessed with it, which I love because it's really good and I'm a really big fan of hers. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity for me to recommend some other films to all of the people who love The Substance, maybe don't love horror films but love The Substance, and thus maybe would be open to seeing a couple of little cheeky horror films that give off the same kind of vibe. Because I have been talking to a lot of my friends and even people who like really don't fuck with horror films really enjoy The Substance. So I feel like it's one of my favorite things when a horror film kind of penetrates the mainstream. A similar kind of thing happened with Longlegs, but I feel like The Substance was like, it was more like pop culture, more like accessible. There's gorgeous people in it. It's a commentary on Hollywood and feminism. Like I feel like it piqued a lot of people's interests, and there's a whole wave of horror films that have been coming out recently that kind of sit in a similar vein. And I also want to talk about some of the films that inspired Coralie Fargeat when she was creating The Substance, and also talk about her first feature film, because she's only done 2. So there's this one and the one that came just previously beforehand. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I have nothing else to say, so let's fucking jump into it. Okay, we're going to start with talking about Coralie's other feature film called Revenge. The thing that I love about Coralie Fargeat's films so far, yet again, she's only done 2, but what I really love about them is that they are graphic as fuck. Like, whether it's the body horror that's in The Substance or the gore that's in Revenge, it's like such a... It's such an example of how gore and body horror and all these things don't have to be exploitative towards women. Like, you can do horror and have all that shit, and there's women out there who love that shit who don't want to watch it when there's like a really gross thing happening to a woman in front of them. And gross things can happen to women in horror films. It's a fucking horror film, of course. Bad things are going to happen to people, but there's a certain way that you can do it where it's not just like super graphic and disgusting and triggering and horrible for women to watch. So that's what I love about what Coralie Fargeat does. And her first film, Revenge, huge trigger warning, it is a rape revenge film. That's kind of the only thing I really want to say about the plot, because I'm not going to lie, there's not a huge amount of plot to it. It's a rape revenge film, but you'd actually be like really surprised by how many rape revenge films in history have been directed and written and completely via the male POV. Like, men have completely dominated this genre, which is this subgenre of horror, which is baffling to me. I only realized this whilst researching this film, even though it seems so obvious. Like, of course, like a horror film in the 60s wasn't directed by a woman, but like, it was just so baffling to me. I was like, what do you mean? This is literally for the female. You're doing a rape revenge film. Like, what the fuck? Anyway, and Revenge is such a beautiful, like, flip on the stereotypes and the misogyny that follows a lot of horror films. And there's so, like, she is... Honestly, Coralie Fargeat's films are for people who loved, like, year 11, year 12 English, love a little deep dive into some symbolism, going real, like, nitpicky with all of the things. Like, you can tear these films apart. You can tear Revenge apart. You can tear The Substance apart. And you will just keep on getting more and more out of them, depending on how many times you've watched them. Revenge is the first film that I'm recommending. Fuck, this is going to be so rambly. The other reason why I really, really love Revenge is it is fucking beautiful. If you've watched The Substance, you'll know that like Coralie has like such a visual flair to what she does, and Revenge is no different. It kind of gives me a similar vibe with it's got a real like intense color saturation to it. It's set in the desert, so as an Australian it automatically makes me think of Mad Max, which I'm just like, yes. Coralie's also directed 2 short films. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't seen them. I don't think that they necessarily sit in the horror genre, but just to mention for anybody who enjoys viewing short films, considering the fact that she's literally only done these like 4 things, I would assume that the short films are really, really great too. So highly recommend go and check them out. I'm gonna put them on my list even though I haven't seen them yet. One is called Reality Plus, and the other one is called The Telegram. Okay, so now moving into films that influenced Coralie whilst she was creating the film, I would say a lot of these are very unsurprising. And majority of them are classics as well. So for me, they're quite accessible for people who haven't seen a lot of horror films or who are only just first starting to get into the groove of it. The Substance, I would also say it's kind of sci-fi because of the concept and like the insanity of it. And quite a lot of these films are sci-fis as well. So let's get into it. Starting off with, weirdly enough, I didn't realize how many people haven't heard of this film. Maybe this is just me getting older, but like this was, to be fair, this is like way before my time. But because my parents owned a Blockbuster and had a deep, deep love of Jeff Goldblum, The Fly was a part of like my everyday life. I had seen it so many times and it was such a huge thing, but so many of my friends had never seen this movie. So it's basically Jeff Goldblum plays a scientist and he flies too close to the sun, no pun intended. I think he's trying to do teleportation. I think that's what it is. And he accidentally gets in the teleportation pad with a fly. And then think like deep, horrible, disgusting body horror. And that's the plot that it's going into, is basically what I would be telling you. But it came out in like, I want to say the 80s, maybe it was the late 70s. It's an old film, so it's all using like practical effects and everything looks amazing and so disgusting, like so fucking disgusting. But it's Jeff Goldblum, he's just as charismatic as he always is. It's a fairly short film. It's a fairly simple film to follow, but it definitely has a lot of body horror in it. So I would watch out for that. But if you've seen The Substance and you liked it, then body horror must be fine for you. So I would recommend The Fly. The next film I'm going to talk about is one of my favorite films of all time. I've forced so many of my friends to watch this. Like so many of my friends to watch this. The original Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. Oh, it's just so good. If, for whatever reason, you haven't seen The Thing, which is fine. We all have our journey. If, for whatever reason, you haven't seen The Thing. So The Thing is about a group of scientists who are up in the Arctic and they basically start getting terrorized by a thing. And that thing can take the form of anybody in the base. So it breeds a lot of suspicion, it breeds a lot of arguments. All of these men are men, and there's a lot of testosterone, and they've been isolated up there for months and months, so they're already looking forward to going home, and then a storm hits and they can't go outside. And it's like, honestly, like single location films for me, there's just something that they like, the simplicity of it. There's just something about like the hyper fixation on the people and the relationships between those people and the dynamics and like the stress levels and the isolation and the feeling of like being trapped, that it just does it for me. Watch The Thing. If you haven't seen The Thing, fucking watch it. I can see why, like when somebody has been taken over by the thing, right? The thing is very like, I don't even know. You can't describe it. That's why it's called The Thing. Like tentacles, teeth going all over. Like they're like a deformed version of the person that they're turning into. So what I would say is that's, I presume, where the influence came from for Coralie. That's what makes sense to me. But it's a brilliant film either way. Even if you didn't like The Substance, don't give a fuck. Watch The Thing. I feel like as though this is a film that a lot of people who don't like horror films would have still heard of because it's Stephen King and he's Stephen King, you know. Carrie, the original Carrie, brilliant film, very much a coming of age film about a woman discovering herself, finding herself, going through puberty, and in maybe the worst way possible is what I would say. And I think that if you loved the feminist commentary or like the societal subtext of The Substance, I think that Carrie is a great film for anybody to watch. It's old, but the acting is amazing. Carrie, she's high schooler. Her mum is like hella Catholic to the point of abuse, and Carrie turns out to have these like psychokinetic powers, and she's getting like deeply bullied by these sociopathic children. Honestly, that amalgamation turns into an absolute mess because she starts going through puberty and her mum has truly never spoke to her about anything to do with her own body or her own agency over her own body, and she just has to figure it out, and it obviously terrifies her. And she's also emotionally unstable because she's been abused by her mum for her entire life, and she's got psychological powers, and she also is getting like severely bullied by these girls. So all of that creates a horror film, and that's Carrie. Watch it. So this one, I think I can see the influences from it from like a stylistic perspective and a cinematography perspective. The Shining, another classic, a really good horror film for people who don't like horror films, because for me, it's borderline a thriller. Like, I know it's a horror film, but it's not scary in a way where it's gory. It's not scary in a way where it's like jump scares. Like, it's none of that. It's suspense. It's a really rich story. It's incredible acting. Like, and yes, I love Stanley Kubrick. He did terrible things to those actors to get those performances out of them, but fuck me, it's a good film. It's such a good film. It's a cinematic masterpiece. Like that, it's a brilliant movie, and I think a lot of people have seen it who don't love horror films. It's probably like a Silence of the Lamb type thing that people have it on their list of like must-watch films. So if you haven't seen it or you haven't heard of it, The Shining is basically about a man called Jack Torrance who takes his wife and his son to go and be the caretaker for a hotel called the Overlook Hotel over a winter period, basically for the season that the hotel is closed. It is snowing, so I presume that that's winter. So they caretake it, but they have to stay there basically isolated. They can't leave the hotel for, I think it's like 3 months or something. But he gets really good pay. Jack's an alcoholic, and the Overlook Hotel is hella haunted, and his son also has telekinetic powers, which is called the Shining. He's got the shine, basically, is what it's called in the universe of The Shining. And so he's ultra sensitive to the ghosts that are in the hotel, and you start to get a little bit of, what's that word for when you go crazy when you have to stay in one place for too long? I can't remember, but the dad starts going a little bit loopy. That's what I'll say about The Shining. It's really, really good. Anybody should watch it, honestly. Great film. She also said that she was influenced by Star Wars and The Elephant Man. Those are fairly famous movies. I feel like I don't need to go too deep into them. Give them both a watch. They're both good. Okay, and now we move into the similar vibes category. So this completely created by me, curated by me, of just like fucking similar vibes. That's it. This is similar vibes. These films give me a similar vibe to The Substance. So I think that if you watch The Substance and you liked it, even if you don't like horror films, you'll probably like these other genre films that I will be talking about. The first one is The Neon Demon. I would say that this movie is kind of like the little sister to The Substance. I would say, not that it's worse, but I think first of all, it was directed by a man. So take from that what you will. But it's trying to tell a very similar story. It's basically trying to go into... It's trying to tell a very similar story. It's about a girl who enters into the fashion world, and there is this whole concept of ultimate beauty and the jealousy that comes from it from other women within that industry. And she's a model, and it's not sci-fi, I'll say that, but she tries to enter into the modeling world. She is entering into the modeling world. She has this one true beauty, whatever. And then people start trying to take advantage of her to get themselves ahead, as is the case in the fashion industry, I guess, and most industries, if I'm being honest. I say it's the little sister because it was written and directed by a man, so the messaging is quite confusing. It doesn't feel like as though the thoughts were finished, if that makes sense. Kind of goes a little bit off kilter towards the end. And I would say that The Substance is more of a complete film. I think if you watch it, you'll understand what I mean. But Neon Demon does have Keanu Reeves in it, so it's got that going for it. Infinity Pool. Okay, so this one I'm going to read the synopsis off of Google, because even though I've seen it like 3 times, I wouldn't be able to describe it to you. So this is a film that is by Brandon Cronenberg. So that's Steven Cronenberg's... Steven? Is that his first name? David Cronenberg. Who the fuck is Steven Cronenberg? I knew that didn't sound right. He's David Cronenberg's son, and David Cronenberg made The Fly. So David Cronenberg is known for like he's like the founding father of body horror. Not actually, like in Western media, he's the founding father. He created a lot of very famous films that feature a lot of body horror in them. One of such being The Fly. So we're featuring the Cronenberg clan in this one. Infinity Pool is by Brandon Cronenberg, who is David Cronenberg's son. And Google says, oh, this is so funny. The synopsis is not at all what the film's about. This, like, honestly, it's impossible to describe, but it's got Mia Goth and a Skarsgård. So, guided by a seductive and mysterious woman, a couple on vacation venture outside the resort grounds and find themselves in a culture filled with violence, hedonism, and untold horror. A tragic accident soon leaves them facing a zero-tolerance policy for crime. Either you'll be executed, or if you're rich enough to afford it, you can watch yourself die instead. Look, that's not what it's about, but it kind of is at the same time. What I got, like, it's a good film if you want to think. It's about like societal, like class structures and money and rich people. Like, it's kind of like a really gross version of Blink Twice in a way. That's the best way that I can put it out there. I would say the reason why I say that you would like it, if you like the substance, is because it does give a societal commentary in a very abstract way. So what happens is very far removed from reality, but it's kind of still within that reality in a similar way to the substance. And I know that this isn't making sense, but in my brain it is. And if you've seen it, you'll get why I'm saying this. It's got really good acting. I don't think it's Brandon Cronenberg's best, but it really does align quite well with the substance. I think you could put it as a double feature. So that's where I'll put that. It's not as beautiful of a film. It's quite intense, I would say, and quite dark. It's not humorous. It's not a horror comedy. I know that the substance has more of that humor kind of aspect. I would say so far the other ones have been a little bit more lighthearted. This one's dark. Revenge is not lighthearted at all, but this one is dark especially. It's a good film and I would give it a go. Next on my list, I really like this movie. Fresh, starring Daisy Ridley Scott, I want to say is her name, and my boy, who I can't remember the name of now, whoever the fuck plays Bucky Barnes in the Marvel movies. What's his name? Sebastian Stan, that's it. It's a really good movie, and it's also not as crazy as everyone says it was. I fully watched this film expecting it to be the grossest thing I've ever seen in my life. Maybe that's because I am fucked up from all the films that I've watched, but it was like, could have been PG fucking rated. Like, not actually, but it's not as gory as you would expect a cannibal film to be. If you haven't heard about Fresh, it's a movie about a girl who goes on a date with a guy that she's just met. For whatever reason, they go on a weekend away to his house, and it turns out that he's a cannibal and he sells women to the rich for their meat, basically. And she's captured and she has to get out. And it's really good, and it's kind of more lighthearted than you would expect. I found it a fun film to watch. Definitely, it's not as graphic as it could be. A lot of what they do in a similar way to Coralie, actually, especially with Revenge, a lot of the really graphic violence against women is implied. Like, you feel it so deeply, but it's implied. It's not like shown to you on a silver platter. And Fresh is also directed by a woman, so it kind of makes sense. You don't need to show everything. You don't need to show and tell everything. Like, people can trust the intelligence of your audience, that they're going to feel the empathy towards what's happening on screen. And I think that Fresh really sits alongside that same vein, and does give similar, it's got a feminist undertone to, it's got many a fucking undertone, but it's very good. I find it quite fun. Sebastian Stan is fucking brilliant in it, and Daisy gives off a fairly strong performance, which is interesting because I haven't really seen her in a role like that before, so I would recommend. And my last film, this one's kind of left-wing, but there's one specific scene that I think is like directly, yes, this is from the substance. So I'm including it at the tail end, but honestly, maybe you wouldn't like it if you liked the substance, but I think that there's connections there. So I'm including it. It's an A24 film called Men. It's British. It's set in maybe Ireland, somewhere in the UK. A woman goes to stay in a cottage by herself and then slowly starts being harassed by the men that are in the town. The reason why I say that there is something in line with the substance with this film. If you have seen the substance, the first time that the transformation happens into Sue, like Margaret Qualley's character, and she comes out of Demi Moore's body, the end of Men, there's some similar things going on, is all that I'll say. Men is brilliant, and then it goes balls to the fucking wall crazy. It feels so grounded. It feels so gripping. It's so scary. It's like a real serious A24 horror film. And then you reach the 3/4 mark and you're like, huh, whoa. That's where I would go with it. I thought it was really interesting, and I have recommended it to people. I do think the ending kind of takes away the scare for me a little bit. You kind of get to a point where you're like, what the fuck is going on? But that also is the feeling that you get at the end of the substance. So I think it all ties in. Well, that's it. I've done it. I've spoken for so long. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you found my recommendations useful. I'll include them down in the description below as well, because I know that this has been a bit rambly and I've been a little bit all over the place. I'll include the links to their Letterboxd pages too, so that you can get an idea of the synopsis that Letterboxd gives it to, and ratings and all that kind of stuff. So thank you so much for watching. Please leave your suggestions down below if there's any other horror films that you would like recommendations off the back of, and I will be back next week with another video.